All right, we're back here on a Wednesday afternoon with Bryan Curtis of TheRinger.com. He is here to finally, once and for all, proclaim the University of Tennessee Knoxville the real UT. People forget that UT Austin is not indeed the real UT. Bryan, I appreciate you following through on this request.
You know, it's funny. It's like that when they do the Pulitzer and they don't have any worthy category winners in a particular category, and they just say no winner this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just took UT, the real UT, off the board for the last decade.
Oof.
No winner.
Well, we're winning now, man. I saw Brad Crawford out here putting UT over Georgia this year.
Wow.
I mean, hey, it's fun times. You've been grinding the Nico Maliava tape over there in SoCal. You're a SoCal guy now. You've been at Long Beach. You've been scouting. You
You
know
know
what's on the
me.
horizon.
Absolutely hunting those bleachers on a
Mm-hmm.
summer day, a little 7-on-7. Absolutely.
It's amazing how just prevalent that is now. And when I talk to so many different high school coaches and stuff, it's just like you never know who's going to be there week to week. It's like, oh, he's got a camp, or he's at 7-on-7, or he's doing this, and it seems like no one's ever all together anymore. There's no like summer camp as a team. They're
No.
just like you're just all over the place because kids want to play 7-on-7, and you're not gonna say you can't do it because it's how they get seen by other people. I don't know. It's a different world, and I don't envy the position that a lot of we talk about college coaches and a lot more on their plate. I think it's also a lot more on high school coaches' plates that was not the case years prior. And they're by and large pretty tired based on who I've talked to.
Absolutely. And it came later for them in football because
Mm-hmm.
basketball had the AAU thing going on forever.
Mm-hmm.
It was later that college football or high school football, excuse me, all of a sudden had, oh, he's playing 7-on-7 and he's at the rivals camp. And all of a sudden I'm his coach,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, sort of, but I'm
Yeah.
not his coach. And obviously with NIL stuff, I'm sure that's gotten even more complicated.
Well, it's also just that like kids can't. So with the portal, a lot of roster spots are being held. So they're waiting to see who is going to be in the portal before they reach on a potential high school kid. So it's like a 3-star, 2-star high school kid might get left out to dry because that university that would typically sign him and take a chance on him are just like, we'll find a group of 5 guy that we can add at the end here and go with that. A transfer who has played a little bit, more experience, older. I don't know. I think there's been a lot of tough conversations with high school coaches that they've had to have with kids, and it's just a weird spot because they know that 99% of these kids are never going to play NFL football, and that by and large the point of this is not to get them ready for the NFL or even just premier college football. Because I mean, you can win 3 straight titles and have one Power 5 college guy. Like it's just not reality, and I think it's just tough for a lot of these guys because these kids want to get the tape out, they want to put the video out, they want the social stuff, and I don't know. It's just a weird spot. It's very, very interesting. I love Friday Night Lights, and you're a Texas guy, so you know high
Of
school
course.
football and just how important it is, and it's my jam. So it's a beautiful mess, just like college football, that I'm going to pick your brain on. That I'm all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not to drive us too far into a ditch, but one of my UT, that is University of Texas, non-real UT
Oh
message
wow.
board guys
Mm-hmm.
has been writing about what you just talked about with recruiting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
should we recruit high 3-star guys anymore
Mm-hmm.
at all? Because, the chances of them being drafted are about 10% if we count
Mm-hmm.
drafted as like a semi-successful college football career, successful college football career, or should we just save those slots
Right.
for the portal? And I think that's a fascinating discussion. I don't like it
Mm-hmm.
because I feel that the toolsy high 3-star guy is the one that we all fall in love with on the message board. Like, oh yeah, I love that guy. He really wants to be here, right? He's the guy
Mm-hmm.
who's giving quotes to the rivals site week after week. It's that family atmosphere. I love it. I'm being a recruiter. I'm talking to other guys, but I don't know about that guy going forward.
Are you still on the message boards? Are you still reading the
Yes.
YouTube? Okay.
Is that old fashioned now?
I think I bet you if we had to do some honest polling for media members, because we're all old now, I think everybody lurks and no one posts. So
Yeah.
it's one of those they have no idea who's lurking. But I guarantee you it's all kinds of folks lurking in the shadows that you would never guess are lurking and reading the posts.
I don't post,
Mm,
but I find not living in Texas that it's an amazingly efficient way to find out what's just going on in the state of Texas. Forget Texas football.
mm.
Like Whataburger has the spicy ketchup back. I'm going to find that out on orangebloods.com faster than I find it out anywhere else. and just all kinds of like, I don't know, just Texas news. I guess it's almost like, when you listen to baseball games remotely and
Mm.
they'll go to the local commercial and it's
Mhm.
just like awesome. It's a, I don't know, a gun store or just something that
Yeah.
screams home for better or worse.
Mm.
I find that same effect listening to reading message boards. It's like that reads like home.
Yeah. I'll get taken out because I'll be watching an NBA Finals game, and then an East Tennessee local business ad pops up, and you're like, "Whoa!" It's just jarring. You'll see something where if I'm away and I'm just like, "What am I watching?" Okay, wow, okay. I did not know I needed a hot tub in the Smokies, but that's what I need right now. And it just jars you every now and then. I imagine if I'm watching it somewhere else, and I just get because it's connected to your your IP and where your address is when you put up the cable or whatever, and then it's just like you're on vacation in Southern California and they're like, "Hey, Smoky Mountain Organics, blah, blah, blah," and you're like, right there back home. But I appreciate it. I like that kind of stuff. It's I mean, there is a show, I don't know, this is right up your alley, and I think about you when I watch this show sometimes because have you ever watched Sports Source in Knoxville?
I haven't.
Okay, I need you to watch a clip. They're all
Okay.
available on YouTube, and I need you to get back to me because Bryan, there's an oral history for Sports Source sitting there for you at the Ringer where it has been going for 20 years. It's a Sunday morning TV thing. It's amazing following Tennessee football games, but it's like it's a 2022 endeavor that looks like it's 1985 and it works and people all watch it and people never ask for it to change. There is no reason for it to change. It's exactly what it needs to be in this market, but it always takes me out when I put it on. I'm like, this is not an old 1987 like this is on right before a new episode of Twin Peaks pops up. Like this is a unbelievable experience that I love. The takes are from like it's all like the takes from Paul Finebaum columns that you talked about with him in the 80s. It's an experience that I absolutely love because you're not getting it anywhere else. Sports Source, I think you'll be very intrigued by what you're watching.
This sounds absolutely fantastic.
Mhm.
I'm in just based on the description. I'm going to watch it, but I'm not sure I even need to at this point because I love it so much already.
It's so great. It's so great. At one point, you'll have one of the reporters, retired reporters, who has like the gambling hat. What do they call that? The visor, the gambling visor. What is that called?
I know what yeah, like the guy at the casino, the green
Yes.
one. Yeah.
Yes. That
Uh-huh.
makes an appearance every week. I mean, I'm telling you, it has everything and it's an absolute delight. I'm all about it. But you met with Paul Finebaum this week. So I was listening to y'all's conversation today, and Paul is extremely interesting. And you did a really good job of framing how different his show is than every other national show, not just because he takes callers, but because it's hard to get a read on where Paul thinks about a lot of stuff, and that's
Mhm.
just not the case on most national platforms. And I've always loved Paul for that because that's kind of where I am with this program, where I've never wanted to be arduous in my opinion having stuff, and like I'll have fun, and people know where I stand on Atlanta and Tennessee and stuff like that. But like by and large, it's guest centric, and I would much rather learn from the other person or get a feel for what they're thinking than what I'm thinking because I don't find that enjoyable. I don't think I'm learning anything. I don't think the listener is learning anything. When I have Andy Staples on or Brian Curtis on, I think they want to hear you guys. I think they want to hear what your perspectives are. So I think it's a humbling aspect of it, but I also think it's just it's just cool because it's a different, fresh perspective. And I think that's actually by and large what most people want out of a podcast. But I think Paul has always done a really good job because I think it's significantly more difficult to do that on a radio show than a podcast.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason, right? Those national sports radio shows, those guys come out at top of the show, top of the hour. Here are my takes.
Mm-hmm.
Call me. The lines are open. Let's go, right? So I'm gonna stir the pot because and his is just completely different. And it's funny with him because I think almost at all times where he stands. He's not
Mm-hmm.
shy about his opinions, but he's a counterpuncher.
Mm-hmm.
Caller will say something, a Stuart Mandel or an Andy Staples will say something, and then he puts in the dig. And then
Mm-hmm.
he insults UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
It just comes out like right at the end, and then boom, commercial. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I got that. It was just in a different order than it normally is.
Did you learn anything new about Paul that you were surprised to glean from him from your conversation?
I just never met him before, so that was, it's always funny to like just somebody that you've listened to for a long time, and in our case, like talked on the phone for stories
Mm-hmm.
before. to actually meet him in person. I thought that was just kind of an interesting experience. I think with him, to me, what was so interesting was like that he was a print reporter first and
Mhm.
foremost, and that he was a guy who sort of saw, as he said in the podcast, like my talent was, I thought I was good at my job. I thought I was really good at stirring things up
Mhm.
in Birmingham, making Alabama fans mad and making Auburn fans mad. But sports radio was just this medium that I could really, really go with. I could go this far as a columnist, and then I could really, really go there. And also that, like he had spent a lot of his early career trying to get out of Birmingham.
Mhm.
He was going to go to Philadelphia and cover the Phillies. Can you imagine that?
That was a
Now,
heartbreaking story that he talks about.
yeah. And the short story is he had broke a big story, and then his paper got sued for libel. They won
Mm.
the case, but it iced all of his national jobs. So he wasn't supposed to be this long timer in the South. He didn't see
Mm.
himself that way. But because of that weird chance, event, he winds up hosting 30 plus years of sports radio and becoming a big star and, Mr. College Football. It's funny.
And it's interesting too because he didn't enjoy writing columns based on that. He liked reporting. He saw himself as a reporter. And it's like, I don't think if he gets sued and he continues reporting, I don't think he flips, right? I got that kind of vibe from him that he was perfectly content being a reporter and that was more his thing. And it makes sense that that is more his thing because when you listen to a show, like you said, and that kind of what we've been talking about here is that like it's not take, and I'm just gonna throw this at you. He's more of accumulating information. He's more of like he's a more curious guy where I think he wants to do that and he'll go wherever the story goes. And he has no qualms about going after universities and presidents if in the interest, y'all talked about this of like, oh, we're looking out for the student athlete's best interest and stuff like that. Like he's more than open to have that kind of conversation and reveal his point of view, but it's also grounded in facts. It's also grounded in a lot of reporting and people he talks to and what he's seen over decades of covering the sport, where it doesn't feel like a hot take. It just feels like this is reality and this is what's actually happening. I'm not giving a take here. This is just reality and this is how I'm presenting it to you guys. But I didn't get the sense that he enjoyed the column aspect where it's like, here's my take and here's 800 words on why this take is unfallible, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think he enjoyed the performance of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think he thought he was very good at, saying the thing that other people weren't willing to say,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think he was one of those guys who's like, I am meant to be a writer full stop and that's it. Though he did write a
Mm.
column for a long time even after he had a radio show. You're absolutely right about the facts thing.
Yeah.
You can hear that when he interviews guests. He's
Mm-hmm.
downloading them as much as interviewing them.
I had never heard it that I might keep that one downloading them. It's super interesting because like our industry now, and I tell folks it's so strange because for me, and I want to get your perspective on this, like I still probably get the most fulfillment writing something that I feel really good about. That's still probably number one for me is if I feel like I have an idea and I'm able to just figure it out and write and organize it in a way that I think works and then
Mhm.
to polish it out and get it all done. That is still the most fulfilling thing for me. But there's so much to audio now and to video and to podcasting and building this. It's a different kind of enjoyment for me to do this each and every day, but it still just doesn't touch writing for me. Is that how it is for you? Like when you obviously love doing the press box, but do you still find the most enjoyment doing the long form pieces for the Ringer?
Yeah, I think if you just like in terms of this is yeah, I had a great podcast or I had a great piece, I probably feel better about the great piece. But
Yeah,
I wonder what that's a result of. There is writing versus podcasting, like two one medium
mhm,
versus another medium. But there's also if you have a great piece, you probably spend a lot of time doing it.
true.
It's the accumulation of hours and hours and hours.
Mhm,
If it's something beyond a column and days and sometimes weeks. So there's a sense of having really, really accomplished a long-term project when you finish one of those.
mhm,
Whereas with a podcast, I try to do lots and lots of research. There's certainly a lot more that goes into it than just the 45 minutes or an hour.
mhm,
But it's also, the mic gets turned off and the podcast is over.
mhm.
So it's also just a very, very different sensation. One feels like the end of a marathon, the other feels sort of like the end of a sprint.
I think that's interesting. Do you think that's something that's always gonna gnaw at your boss, where he's always gonna have that drawback to writing, where it's different because he's taking a hiatus, I listened this week. So maybe that's what happens. The hiatus. He's like, I get the itch, and I want to write.
I don't know. I actually asked him about. I had him on the press
Yeah, it was a
box
great show.
fairly recently, and I
Mm,
was just really interested to get into that whole thing with him. And I won't try to summarize everything he said about writing and stuff. But yeah, I mean and to me, I think we're all in that zone, or a lot of us are. I'll say a lot of us are in that zone now because there are these
mm,
great opportunities with audio. Audio's fun, podcasting's awesome, but it also, if you want to have a good podcast, you want to pour a lot of your energy and your good ideas into that.
mm-hmm.
And then you have so many ideas to go into the writing, so it's a weird balance.
And it's new, and I think I've talked to close friends and family about this, where this was not a this was not an option for folks 20 to 30 years ago, where it's like you either went into sports radio and that was your thing, or you went into broadcast news and that was your thing, or you were a sports writer and that was your thing. Now you have options where you're like, you can be a sports reporter. You can also be a sports like television guest. You can be on an analyst on shows, and you can also host a podcast every day. So you can be all three now, and it's almost like expected that you do all three, or like try and do all three. And then you're like, man, I am pulled in a lot of different directions, and I don't really know where I should put the majority of my creative juice into, because there's only so much you can do each day. And it's complicated, where I think about it sometimes, where I'm like, do I ever get to a point where I'm just like, I should only pour all my creative juice and my focus into the podcast and just leave writing behind? Or do I want to continue seeing if I can juggle both? Or do I want to eventually one day move on? I think I'm locked in the podcast. I've done so many hours, and I've grown it so much over the years, and just getting signed and getting to where the show is now. I don't think I could ever do it. It's like my child at this point. Like it's a part of me, and I've watched it grow up. And we're in third grade, and I want to see what it's like in ninth grade before I make any other changes. But it is something I think about a lot. Of just like I'm kind of envious of journalists of yesteryear who didn't have that choice, and they just were like singular focused on their particular craft instead of having this pull to do a bunch of different things. Do you think about that?
Well, I think if we got in the time machine and went and talked to those journalists of yesteryear,
Mm-hmm.
they would be really annoyed that they are only writing for a newspaper, that
Hmm.
people have to buy their newspaper, that they can't get their newspaper online, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have a tiny, tiny audience, and they would constantly be telling you, "Man, if I just had a national outlet, if I just had an outlet where I could really be me instead of confined by this newspaper or magazine to write articles a certain way." So it would actually be just completely the opposite problems, and they would have
Hmm.
absolutely no sympathy for us at all.
Interesting. What's your morning routine like? What do you read? How do you organize? Because I have like a whole spreadsheet that I go through to read everything I need to read. How do you do your morning routine?
It's weird. I usually try to put it off because I find my
Hmm.
brain is working at its best, for whatever that's worth, when I first wake up. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever project is in front of me, if it's figuring out questions for a podcast guest, if it's writing a piece, if it's just researching a topic, I'll just front load all of the most important thing as much as I can. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll sort of look at Twitter and just kind of look around a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise I find that it's better if I sort of put that off till midday,
Hmm.
which of course is weird because then a whole nother, then we've had 5 more news cycles by then,
Yeah.
so then it's kinda like, "Oh, wait, what?" I missed that thing that was overnight, but to me, that works a little bit better, just how my brain works.
Interesting. What's your favorite aspect of watching sports in the West Coast? Because this is the biggest pull. If you ever want to pull me to the West Coast, like that's it. I'm just so envious. But is it weird for you to watch Texas at like 9 a.m. your time?
The 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. college football start is really weird.
Yeah.
Game day going off the air, and you're like, "Whoa, I'm drinking coffee still right now." Sometimes I've just gotten up.
Hmm.
Um, I'll tell you what's weird, I have kids who are 6 and 9,
Hmm.
and so there is an absolute dream of having games start and wrap up early, partly because my
Hmm.
son, who's 9, can actually watch it. Like, my
Hmm.
son can watch Sunday Night Football or the Super Bowl in its entirety because it ends at 8:30,
Hmm.
and he can go to bed like
Right.
a good 4th grader should. On the other hand, every afternoon or night game starts right in the middle of dinner. So
Hmm.
just in terms of, like, being a dad who's present and not, "Oh, dad's in the other room again watching sports,"
Hmm.
you feel kinda like you're kinda doing a bad thing because you're constantly pulled away right at these key family moments. But I do love it because, again, stuff ends at 8:30, and then you're like,
Yeah.
I can get 2 or 3 hours of working or watching TV or whatever I wanna do after everything shuts down for the night,
Yeah, it's
which is
pretty
pretty
nice,
fabulous.
Bryan. Yeah, I right in these Tennessee games, like, when I'm doing, like, the baseball stuff and it's late, I'm like, "Do I just wanna wake up early or do I wanna write into 2 AM, writing about this?" And it's a tough back and forth, but if you I think about that where Tennessee baseball ended at, like, 8 PM, it's done. You have this whole other part of your day and you can get through it. Yeah, it's just I romanticize the West Coast sports viewing experience because, East Coasters, we have it rough over here.
There's a lot of sports breakfast, put it that way.
That I'm down for that. Like, I would love to start my day because I do that anyway. Like, I put on something from the previous night that I need to watch and watch some film of, or for like I don't feel like watching the Braves that particular night, then I watch it in the morning and I can speed through and get where I need to be. Forget the Braves right there, catching the Mets, and tonight or as we record this podcast, they could be a half game back after of the Mets in the NL East. People forget Atlanta Braves pretty good at baseball.
There you go.
In terms of the Texas Longhorns, though, Bryan, you get
Yeah.
Arch Manning, who, I mean, Arch Manning, you get Quinn Ewers back after his, what do we want to call his experience in Columbus?
Hmm.
His internship,
His gap year.
his gap year, where he got paid handsomely for some. I wonder what classes he took. Like, that's what I want to know. What was he taking
That's a
that
good
year?
question. Do you think he took, like, the full load? Because, like, I'm definitely not playing this year,
hmm
maybe?
I would, right? Like, because you're gonna have to get through it anyway. So just do like that would be interesting. But you got Quinn Ewers now, who should start week 1 for Sark. Last year, obviously, it was a little bit bumpy for Sarkisian, but
Just a tad.
just a tad. But you things are pretty good, and I like Arch. Obviously, there was a avalanche of folks who followed Arch to Texas. 10 recruits not too long after he signs. Um, this is a really interesting situation because Arch is blazing his own path. He's following his uncle Peyton, where there were no Tennessee ties in the Manning family. Like, this was an Ole Miss, Louisiana type thing, and then he goes to Tennessee. Arch is kind of doing the same thing where he's just like, yeah, we're going to the SEC, but I want to have my own thing. I don't want to be an Ole Miss Rebel. I don't want to stay home and do the LSU thing. I don't want to follow my uncle to Tennessee. Like, I'm gonna go to Texas, and I think it's super important that Sark is able to establish that right away. Where you get Quinn Ewers, and then you bring in Arch, and people are like, oh, how does it work between the two of them? The whole point is getting them. Like, it will figure itself out. Like, you'll be fine if you have multiple 5-star quarterbacks in a room. Guess what? One of them is going to work out. That's how this works. You want as many as humanly possible. When you saw that, though, Arch Manning actually picked Texas and did it in the most Arch Manning way possible of just like, I'm going to Texas. And that was it. No video, no anything
His
else.
first tweet ever, right?
Yeah, and he was just like, and we don't even know if he did it. He probably didn't even do it. He just had some family friend or whatever just schedule a tweet for it to go out when it needed to. But I I'm very, very fascinated to see what happens here because I've been so curious to see how Texas translates into the SEC because I think Oklahoma's gonna be fine. And Venables is putting together an SEC staff, and he's just putting like he has so many new coaching positions. And if you want to look at their stuff, you're like, oh god, Venables is just like Lincoln Riley. We're tripling the staff. We're doing this. We're doing that, and he knows what's coming. For Texas, I was like, they're struggling just to get out of the Big 12. Like, they're struggling to put together 10-win season in the Big 12. Like, I don't know about this move for them. Does Arch coming make you feel better, though? Are you just like, we got Arch Manning in the building. We got Quinn Ewers under center this week. I don't really care about the other stuff. I'm just happy we have Arch Manning.
Yeah, it makes me feel like they've done the thing they had to do after a terrible season last year and really
Mm.
a decade of terrible Texas football, which is, as you say, first of all, you got to go get a quarterback. That has been a really, really awful position for Texas, especially since they've been in the middle of a state that is churning out quarterbacks like crazy. They've
hmm
managed somehow to find none of them,
hmm
or sort of one half of one in Sam Ellinger.
hmm
We want to put him on the list. So he did what he had to do, and look, I think my personal jury, if I may, on Sark is out. Like,
mm
he really could be a 7 or 8 win coach. He's been that his whole career. There's no evidence that he's going to be better than that. But the one thing at this point in his life that he should be able to sell is, I'm really good at turning quarterbacks into first-round draft picks.
Mm.
You should absolutely be able to sell. They did that at Washington, did it at USC, did it at Bama, and you should be able to go to the best quarterbacks in the nation and say, "I know how to do this.
Mm.
I absolutely know how to do this." And now he's done it twice in a period of a couple of months. And I'm totally with you. The whole what's going to happen if they're both on the roster? Come on now,
Mhm.
okay? Come on. This
What
is okay.
Yeah.
This is the Alabama problem. The
Yes.
Texas problem has been, let's look around the quarterback room like, we don't want any of these guys to start.
Yeah.
Let's have the different problem first, and then we can worry about that.
Tennessee fans are doing that where it's like, well, Taven Jackson's already in the building this year, the 4-star kid, and then Nico's the next year. It's like, that's not a problem. And can you imagine like walking and just saying that to Sark's face, like asking that question in the reporter pool of like, how are you going to juggle multiple 5-stars? And he's like, what do you mean? How am I going to juggle? I'm just going to have multiple 5-stars in the room, and we're going to win a lot of football games because I always have talent at the quarterback position, the most important position in football. That's the whole point of this is this. What are you talking about?
Totally. And the ad here is that Texas was in a great position with the NIL to
Hmm.
make itself relevant
Hmm.
again. Big state school, big boosters, rich alumni that can put together and an organization to do that, right? And they have obviously let's just say that they've obviously done that.
Hmm.
Last year's recruiting class, which had a ton of offensive linemen right at the end, and then this year with Arch Manning and all the guys that have followed him in. So again, if there are advantages to being a flagship university in a state like Texas, it should be able that you have your ducks in a row in that aspect, and they seemingly do.
Do they have a bigger base than A&M, or like you're more familiar? Are they like, do they have more of an NIL superpower potential than A&M, or is A&M just doing a lot early?
Yeah, I think A&M was just more organized.
Hmm.
I don't know how to like rate levels of Texas wealth. They're just beyond my comprehension. So let's call it a draw.
Mm,
A&M was seemingly more organized out of the gate. But again, this is the thing. I was joking with my podcast partner David the other day.
mm.
It's like we've been winning the revenue national championship for like 20 years now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we made more money than everybody else. Yeah, let's put up a banner. So if we're gonna crow about making more money, oh look at all this money, which
Mhm.
who cares? It doesn't matter to people like that. I don't care. I don't win anything. I don't get a
Mhm.
ring when we have more revenue than anybody else. If that's the case, then let's figure out, let's meaning the whole
Mhm.
Texas community figure out the NIL game and be good at that. And I think they have.
And David, he's a Baylor guy, isn't he?
He's a Baylor guy. We're
So he
still
can just
friends.
rub it in. He's like, we almost just won the Big 12 and we have no money. Like we're over here just
No,
yeah,
won a
we're just a
basketball
fixer-upper
national
school.
championship.
Yeah.
I mean, they're actually good at sports. That's the
Yes.
that's the thing, and they get left behind. And that's why the realignment thing is just so weird to me. Because I think,
Hmm.
what did we do over the last 10 years to qualify for the SEC? Well, we're the flagship University of Texas, but that's
Mhm.
been the case for 100 years now. Haven't been good at football. We haven't
Mhm.
turned out like number one draft picks. We've just done exactly the opposite of that. So we're the winners in the whole realignment scheme by being big losers, but by having structural advantages over everybody else. I mean, you could say the same thing about USC.
Yeah.
I just find that to be so weird. So, like, am I happy that Texas is in column A instead of column B? Absolutely, when this
Mhm.
all gets sorted out. But at the same time, it's a really, really strange kind of victory when, nothing has really happened on the field. It's just, again, things that are inherent to being the University of Texas at Austin that were inherent back when we were in the Southwest Conference.
It's just so strange. You mentioned USC, and I mean, Georgia's figured this out. And this was something that I think Georgia fans, that's like the most frustrating part about talking to Georgia fans about Georgia football right now, is that like this, this build it from the ground up stuff that Kirby built. Cause he's built Alabama 2.0 and they're a Death Star now, and they're going to be great for as long as Kirby's there and everything else. But like, look at where these kids are coming from. I'm very familiar with high school football in the state of Georgia and very familiar with how many 5-stars and 4-stars are in the state of Georgia. Yes, this is what it should have been. Like, this is what it always could have been. This is not some, like, Tennessee has to go to North Carolina. They have to go to Georgia. They have to go to Virginia. Texas, USC, and Georgia should be this every year. It's
Mhm.
right there. Kids want you, like, they want an excuse to stay home. Like, they want you to give them a reason to stay home. They want their family to be able to go to these games. They want their friends to be able to go to these games. They don't want to leave. By and large, they don't want to leave the home state. And it's like, great, congratulations on locking down one of the best recruiting areas in the country where high school football is just the biggest priority in the state. Like, yeah, that's how it should be. It just,
Totally.
you don't have to get creative. So that's the whole thing with Texas is like, I understand why Texas fans are mad. And I also get why they have high expectations because there is no excuse for the Longhorns not being a college football playoff contender every single year. Like you have a right and a reason to have unrealistic expectations where it's like, Sark, you're out. Like you get 2 years, done. Like we're gonna find somebody else. Everybody can recruit in Texas. That's how it works. Like we'll always have that. And we have the money and everything else and the resources. And yet it never we shouldn't say never. They were in the national title game a decade ago. Like it's
Yeah.
not that long ago.
The 2000s were a very good decade for Texas.
Exactly. And I don't know. I think there is still a lot of reason for optimism, but how much do you think A&M's strides in recent years has kind of frustrated Texas fans even more?
Oh, big time. And I think
Mhm.
especially with the recruiting classes. Now, Texas fans will always, and again, I said this as a longtime denizen of the message boards, will always point to Texas A&M and go, "Well, when's that last national championship banner?
Mhm.
Was that World War II? Was that when that one was put up?" Because they've been, and again, when I was a kid, they were the better team by
Mhm.
far in the 80s. They were awesome putting guys in the pros. Texas
Mhm.
was not very good. Um, so there's always this we won one
Mhm.
recently, and you
Yeah.
won 0 recently. But I think, yeah, with them going out and getting the big time coach, which Texas hadn't been able to do, right? Texas tried that with Nick Saban
Mhm.
to whatever degree, didn't work. Settled for the Tom Hermans, the Charlie
Mhm.
Strongs, the Sarks, the very gettable type of coaches. A&M went and landed the big fish. Then following that up with recruiting success and pretty good season on the field last year, considering A&M didn't have much of a quarterback, last year. So yeah, oh, absolutely, it makes them
Have you already pre-ordered the Arch Manning jersey for your son?
mad. See, buying the Texas jersey to me, I have not bought one since Colt McCoy.
Okay. But now you get the name on the back though. This is like that's going to be weird to see Manning on the back of a
Yeah,
Texas jersey.
that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. There's a
Yeah.
certain glamour in that. I also just kind of reached the should I be wearing a jersey phase of adulthood.
Well, do you wear any sports stuff? Like, well, first off, how often have you been able to get back to Texas to go see a game? When was the last time?
Pre-pandemic, I was good for 1 or 2 a year.
Okay.
Usually the Oklahoma game in Dallas because that's home for me is Fort Worth. So I'd go home and go to that game, which is my absolute favorite college football game to go to.
What do you still call it? Do you call it the big do you call it the shootout or have you renamed it?
The pre 2000 name. I do not allow this to be changed. Yeah,
Mhm.
just Texas OU, right? We don't even need the moniker.
Yeah, I guess not.
The Cotton Bowl.
What do you think ultimately happens though? What is your gut telling you about Texas this year?
Well, there's still the run before you can walk phase.
Yeah.
This was a bad football team
Mhm.
last year, and I think 8 wins is probably a pretty good scenario this year, with potentially like a big win over somebody. We're gonna take Bama off the board right now.
Mhm.
I don't know if I should go to that game just for the I was there win
Yeah.
aspect of it. But beating OU would be a start. Winning 8-9 games, just being relevant again. I mean, to me, that's the step they haven't taken
Mhm.
in a couple of years. And I think if you take that step, and then Quinn Ewers is in his junior year, what will be effectively his junior year,
Mhm.
right, or redshirt sophomore year, then it's like, okay, this gets interesting. You have another good recruiting class this year. Okay, then we can talk.
Mhm.
But to me, we've been getting ahead of ourselves at Texas for a long time, so I'm gonna tap the brakes just a bit.
They're the biggest wild card in the Big 12. Like the Big 12 is fun for a number of reasons, but I think the biggest is that you could talk yourself into 7 teams winning the Big 12 this year.
Absolutely.
And that's not the case in any other conference. Like Kansas State could win the Big 12 this year. Absolutely.
I think
Like
that's on the board somewhere. And it's not really a compliment to the Big 12 because I don't think any of
yeah.
those teams are great, you know? I
They're
mean,
all good though. They're all
all
they're like
good.
they're all solid. They're all Iowa State on down. Like they're all solid. Like you could just talk yourself into a lot of these different programs and that's fun.
Yes, it feels like a bunch of 8-win teams,
Yeah.
honestly. They could sneak up into the, 8, 9, 10 range if somebody
Yeah,
really
an
gets lucky.
all-time year if like Adrian Martinez is who everybody thought he was going to be at Nebraska. Yeah, that's
That's
a
the big
10-win team. Like we've seen it at K-State with Colin Klein and company. Like we've seen them do that.
that's the
Uh,
wild card of all wild cards in the Big 10 and Big
exact
12
or Big 12.
specifically.
Oh, that's a Freudian slip there.
Oh god,
All right.
I'm already in the super conference era. Have we joined? Texas joined a different conference in the last 20 minutes.
I got so bummed because I had on Staples yesterday, and he was telling me, yeah, he's like, oh, the realignment pods do better numbers than any other pods throughout the year, and I'm
Mhm.
like, and I thought about you when he said that because I was like, Bryan tweets about this all the time of like worried about ratings and what this all means, and it's like, oh god, the realignment conversation and also just realignment in college football is probably going to be better ratings, and it's still missing the point where everyone's going to talk about it. It's like I feel like I'm banging my head against the door all the time when someone, if you have this conversation, the first thing they'll say is like, well, it's money. It's like, yeah, I got that. Like,
Some people say follow the money. Ooh,
right.
thanks, Woodward.
Yeah, I got it. Like,
Here's
oh,
the
have you
tip.
heard about this? Did you hear about ESPN and Fox that they might have some influence over what? Really? Okay.
Mhm.
Got it. Yeah, no, we all got that. We know why it's happening. What we're saying is whether or not it's good and whether or not it's that's the conversation we're having. We're not having whether or not money's involved. I've heard it. Did you hear about this? Did you see this? The Jay Leno stuff. Money in college football. It's more of like, well, this is kind of bad for a lot of programs. And I think the biggest tell, and this is something that I want to get your perspective on, is that I think when you think about regional fan bases versus like how national analysts and reporters see those people, there could
Mhm.
not be a bigger disconnect than national college football analysts and regional college football folks. Like I think that's the biggest disconnect of any sport all across the country where I like not to pick on anybody, but like Cowherd made this point of like, oh, what I was not going to watch was Colorado, Oregon State. You know what I am going to watch? USC, Penn State. You know what I am going to watch? And the cut, and I'm like, okay, that you were never going to watch. What? That's not Colorado and Oregon State fans were going to watch that game. They were going to watch that.
Yes.
Like Oregon State wants to see Oregon State. That's the regionality of it. They're going. Like it's not like they're empty stadiums over there and that there are people in Corvallis and Pullman and all these other areas that don't watch and love that game. That's a complete misunderstanding. We understand that like on a national level that game has more interest and it'll be closer, more NFL, future NFL guys in the roster. But like, that's literally never been why anyone's watched college football. And that's not how any fan in Corvallis sees it, where they're like, or any fan in USC, like, they're not thinking, oh, I'd rather do this than this. Like, no, it's still a regional sport that people want to watch regional rivalries, even if it's not a sexy national game. Like, that's not a real thing. So, what you're going to see happen, I think, is I think if they do this wrong and they do the super conference stuff wrong, what you'll see is those fans in those areas don't watch the big games. They literally will just watch the group of five or wherever they fall into, and they just don't have association with the college football as a whole anymore. It's just kind of like this hobby that they watch, kind of like MLS where you watch your team and then that's it. I don't think they're going to tune in because they're not a part of that group anymore. They're not a part of
Mhm.
the bigger picture. So then you're asking, well, hold on, this is a better game. You should watch this, Oregon State fan. You should tune into this. No, Oregon State fans are gone. Georgia Tech fans are gone. Syracuse fans are gone. And that's not a huge piece, but it's a piece. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what actual fans in these areas and in these college towns and who went to universities and understand, like you and I being in the South and that kind of thing, we get that. But I think a lot of folks just they need to go and fly into Pullman or fly into College Station and talk to what actual fans are looking for.
Well, it's too late because they
Yeah.
went to the wrong college, obviously.
Yeah.
The only time I feel like people like us can pull rank is on college sports because
Mhm.
you just understand in a different way.
Yes.
I didn't go to an Ivy League school, and sometimes I feel sorry for people who didn't go to Ivy League schools. You missed out. I mean,
Right.
I can't tell you how like going to college football games was the reason I went to the University of Texas. I'd love to have
Mhm.
18 high-minded academic reasons. I'm so glad I went, but it was pretty much number one on the list.
Mhm.
That would organize my 4 years is that I would have fall Saturdays, and that would be incredibly fun. It absolutely lived up to the hype in this case.
Mhm.
And you're absolutely right. If you weren't there, I don't know what to tell you. It's really, really hard to understand. It's really hard to understand why you can't just trade Oklahoma State
Mhm.
for Ole Miss and everything will just be exactly the same. No, it
Right.
won't. We had 25 years of figuring out why we dislike Oklahoma State and what
Mhm.
particular opinion we have of their fans, which is slightly different than Texas Tech fans and was different than Nebraska fans before they left the conference.
Yeah.
It's just not transferable in that
Right.
way. I think there is the one thing that college football fans actually didn't like was the equivalent of wrestling squash matches at the beginning of the
Yes.
season. There was way too many of those. That's
Mhm.
gotten better over the last 10 years, but there's just way too much junk in the college football season. We're like,
Mhm.
okay, let's, subscribe to the Longhorn Network for 2 weeks so we can so we can watch us beat New Mexico State or whatever. I think there was a dissatisfaction with that. There was absolutely not a dissatisfaction with a regional rivalry.
Mhm.
Come on, man. And if
You know what
that
we need? We need more neutral site games. I think that's what fans really like, is, like, they love you know what's fun?
take
Like,
the Jared
Tennessee
world even more, yeah.
yeah, no, who would wanna go to Notre Dame for Notre Dame, Georgia? You would have rather have played that game in Charlotte at the Belk Bowl. Like, that's where you wanna do that, is you don't
Absolutely. I mean, come on. I want an NFL stadium. That's where I
Yes.
want to play my college football games.
But that's where we're going, and that's what I think is, like, they're not gonna be NFL stadiums, but they're going to feel like NFL game venues because they're going to be so just like, there's no rivalries anymore, so they're just playing 2 random college teams that have no baked in, like, animosity, so it's just gonna be a really laid back it's just not gonna be the same. Like, it's gonna feel a little watered down. It's just gonna be a watered down in-house product because you don't have like Tennessee, Florida this fall. Like the future is we will not have Tennessee, Florida every year. That looks like that's probably out with future expansion. There that's a different vibe when you have 17 years of Florida just finding ways to beat Tennessee and ruin seasons no matter how good Tennessee was that year compared to Florida. But you have to have those years and you have to have that animosity and you have to have that built in. But when you flip out Florida for Ohio State or whatever, and then Ohio State doesn't come back to Neyland for another 20 years, it's just not it's not the same. It's not going to feel the same in the in the Coliseum. It's not going to feel the same in the stadium. It's just not going to have that same vibe, and it really bums me out.
I agree. And I think you have to go to the games to
Mhm.
sort of even feel that or feel it most acutely.
Mhm.
Because this whole thing is obviously designed for television. That's almost
Right.
like all the money. But as a television presentation, Chris Fowler and Herbie will be rare to go. Look at this matchup. Oh
Mhm.
wow, here we go, right? But it will take going to games and kind of looking around and going not just for the long awaited Texas Bama game, but the
Mhm.
other games on the schedule to just feel what's lost
Yeah.
and feel like, wow, this is the slot that Texas Tech used to be in. This is a slot
Mhm.
that Baylor used to be in. And that just had a interesting resonance that Mississippi State isn't going to have. It's
Mhm.
and something against Mississippi State. It's just different, and you just can't rewrite all that stuff in 1 year, 5 years. I don't think even 20 years.
But they're right. We'll still watch. Like a
Of
lot of
course,
us, we're still gonna watch. I just think it's gonna be I'm just gonna be shouting at the world like this is bad. Like this is all bad. I'm gonna
oh yeah,
watch, but
stop.
it's not yeah. No one was complaining. And that's my whole thing is like no Tennessee fan was complaining. They're like, you know what, we're doing these rivalry games too much. No Texas fan was like, we're playing Texas Tech too much. We're playing Baylor too much. It's just no one asked for this. Brian, I'm sad.
Texas fans might have actually been complaining.
Yeah, that's probably true. They're more
They've been
worried
trying to
about
sabotage every conference they're in for 25 years. They might get a pass, but they're the exception that proves the rule.
There you go. Brian, what can we look out for you at theringer.com this week? The press box, you have Paul Finebaum on that people can check out on Spotify and all that good stuff. But what would you like to plug as we wrap up here today?
Paul Finebaum. Yeah, we got Monday back on the press box with my pal David Shoemaker, and then I'm
Hmm.
doing a little sports radio. I'm out on the East Coast this summer, so I'm doing a little sports radio tour of the East Coast.
Hmm.
I know you're a fellow fan of sports radio.
Oh, yeah.
Again, kind of the rivals message board of electronic media.
Yeah.
So I did sat down with Angelo Cataldi in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago, who's
Okay.
leaving there after 30 plus years. Paul Finebaum, and I got one more next week, and then I'm going to wrap up my tour and go on to other things. But it's been
Okay. I like it. I like it. Brian Curtis, I wish you nothing but the best going forward. It'll be fun. Enjoy your summer. And we'll have to reconnect when Nico versus Arch happens in Neyland maybe in a couple of years. We'll see.
for our new very organic rivalry between the two UTs. Yeah, I always hated those guys.
And TV execs are like, why is there not a lot of hatred? Where's the fans? Like, what's going on here? Why don't they seem to really hate each other? Oh, who would have thought
Mhm.
that you can't just push that onto people? That was not how it worked.
Thanks for
Um,
having me, Chase. Always great to talk to you.